have a confession to make. I am a hoarder of animal bones. Hi everybody, thanks so much for stopping by the homestead. My name is Sarah from Traditions Homestead. And while the weather is chilly and it's the perfect time of year to make soups and to make a bunch of homemade broth. Now, throughout the year, as we are processing animals, as we are breaking them down, parting them out, and putting them in the freezer or canning them, and as I'm cooking, all of those bones that are kind of left over that you may throw away or you may give to animals or whatever, I actually put them in the freezer so that during this time of year I can pull them out and make giant batches of broth. Now, I save chicken bones, turkey, rabbit. We have a lot of rabbit on our homestead that we raise and eat. When Kevin is hunting deer, I save venison bones. We have beef bones in there and goat bones actually. We've had some meat goats in the past, and I have goat bones in the freezer, and I use all of them to make homemade bone broth. Now, there are several reasons to make your own broth. The first reason is it tastes fantastic. The stuff from the store is really kind of anemic. It doesn't really have a whole lot of flavor. It doesn't really have any nutrition left in it. So that's a really good reason to make it at home. Also, it is essentially free, right? You're using leftover parts that you would have either thrown away or not used, some water, a few vegetables if you want to, and there you have, free soup. The other reason is health reasons. Bone broth is becoming more and more popular. It's coming out in the news and in research now, the importance of a healthy gut. And bone broth is a really great way to start incorporating all of those nutrients and to heal your gut and just to give it the nutrients that you need in your diet in order to be healthy. And isn't really that why we're doing this homestead thing, is really just have a healthier life for our families and to be independent of more things, including the grocery store. So I love making broth. It's one of my favorite things to do ever. But I also like to save a bunch of time. Most of the time we're using our crock pots to make bone broth, or we're using a kettle on the stove. But my preferred method to get a lot of it done at once is to use a big roaster. And I have dug out my roaster from the barn that stays in storage most of the year because a lot of times it's just too hot for me to be doing stuff like this. I use this roaster. It's a Nesco 18-quart roaster oven. It's really for roasting big amounts of food for your church potluck or for a family get-together or whatever. It has a special knob on here that controls the temperature, and you can set it at like 200 degrees all the way up to 450 degrees. So it is very versatile. I'll be honest though, I really only use it for making broth. I'll tell you that if you looked in my freezers right now, especially my kitchen freezer above the refrigerator, it is absolutely packed with bones. There's a little bit of room in there to maybe put 1 or 2 ice cube trays, but that's really about it. So, perfect timing, right? My shelves are empty of broth, and I need more. So I'm going to be pulling out some of those bones and putting in my roaster, and I'm going to take you along to show you how to make big batches of broth. And then when you're finished, you have a couple different options of what to do with it in order to make it last for a little bit longer of time, okay? So I'm going to get started. I'm going to pull some of the bones out of the freezer, and I'm going to start loading them up, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing. Well, I have a mixture of different types of bones here. Now, I consider rabbit bones, or I treat rabbit bones as poultry bones. I don't normally mix poultry bones with like a red meat bone. So I pulled out mostly what I would consider poultry bones. I've got one complete back from a turkey. I have 4 backs of the rabbit. Now, so far these are all raw bones, but I also save cooked bones from chickens and turkeys and those kinds of things. So I have a couple sets of cooked bones. And I'm also going to be using some some, you know, I don't want to say gravy, but you know when you bake a chicken or roast a chicken, on the bottom of the pan at the end are a bunch of like the juices and the broth. Well, if I don't have a gravy to make or some kind of recipe that I'm going to be using those chicken juices in, or turkey juices, I actually will pour them into a jar like this, and then put this in the freezer too, so that when I pull out the bones and make broth, I can just add those juices and stuff into the broth, and then I end up canning it with everything else. Now, I'm going to be putting these all in a single layer on the bottom of my roaster, so that's the very next step. You don't want to overfill your roaster, because then you won't have enough room for any water to make your broth. So really we're just going to be making a single layer of bones in the roaster. Now the next thing that you're going to put in with your bones are some veggies to give them flavor, and some spices, some herbs, spices, whatever you want to call them. Now this is completely optional. You can really just put water in here, turn it on, cover it, and let it go and cook, and you will get broth. But I really find that adding a few vegetables and a few spices will really bring out the flavor and will make it taste really fantastic. Now, I really use 2 vegetables in my broth. I use onions and celery. Lots of people put carrots in there, but I just happen to not like the taste of cooked carrots. I think it's very strong tasting, so I leave them out. Other people will put, you know, parsnips or, you know, just other kinds of things in there. I just prefer not to, and I always have onions, and I almost always have celery in the house, and so that's what we're going to chop up in here. Now, this is about, you know, 3 or 4 times the size of a slow cooker, so we're going to be putting kind of a substantial amount of onions and celery in there. So that's what we're going to get going right now. Okay, I'm going to chop up 4 whole onions. Now I chose 4. 3 or 4 is probably okay, but 3 out of my 4 are pretty small, so I chose 4 total. 4 whole onions, including the skins. The skins need to go in there because it will produce a fabulous color within your broth. It'll make it a really nice brown color. And when you're chopping up your celery, make sure that you keep in the greens. The celery greens can go right in there. You don't have to chop off this end part either. It can all just be thrown in there. So I'm going to just start chopping. Start chopping. Whatever. Also, this doesn't have to be fancy schmancy like chopping, just big chunks, okay? It's gonna cook down. I think these are like 2-inch pieces. It's gonna cook down beautifully, and so you don't even have to worry about a lot of chopping. Just get them cut up a little bit and get them thrown in there. Same goes for your onions. You don't have to do any special fancy chopping. You know, just chop them into chunks and put them right into your pot, okay? I probably chop them into, you know, 6 or 8 pieces, and I just throw them in there because they're just going to cook down. It doesn't matter. One thing I don't put in at this point, or at all rather, and a lot of people do, and it's really just a personal choice. I do not add garlic to my broth. I love garlic. I don't have anything against garlic, but my intention is to pressure can this, and in my experience, the flavor of garlic during the pressure canning process turns kind of bitter. And I don't think it adds anything. I think it actually takes away from the great flavor of the bone broth. So I don't do that. There are 2 more important things that I need to add yet before I start adding all of the water and turning this on. And that is bay leaves. My bay leaves right now are like kind of all crumpled up, but I would say you want to add the equivalent of 4 full-size bay leaves. And that just really gives some fantastic flavor. And the other thing you need to add, or the other thing I add, are black peppercorns. Now I will probably add the equivalent of a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. I don't really measure. But about about that much. In my palm, that's probably a tablespoon or a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm just going to put that over here. And that will add some really fantastic flavor. Okay? I also don't add salt. I don't like to add it at this point because then I have less control over how much I add into my dish. So I don't add garlic, I don't add salt at this point because I'll add it later on. Okay, so everything that I need to make this bone broth is in here minus the water. Now this is going to be a very heavy roaster after I put the water in, so I'm going to put it back on the counter where I'm going to have it cook. And then we'll go ahead and add the water. Well, I have this pretty much where I want it to stay and cook down for the next couple of days, and I filled it up with water right up to the edge, to the lip where the lid is going to be. So the lid won't rest down in any water, but it's up to the top full enough that it's filled. The next step is for me to cover it, and then I will turn up the heat, turn it on, and I'm going to put it on 250 degrees or slow cook. And I'm going to leave it there for 2 days. Now, I am a firm believer that 24 hours is not enough for broth. I think 2 days is a perfect amount of time. There have been many times where I was just busy on that second day, so I let it go on to a third day, and that really is the longest I am comfortable letting it go, because I feel like the bones start tasting kind of charred or like overcooked by then, and then that flavoring also gets into my broth. It's not terrible, it's just not the best. So I recommend 2 days, okay? So in the meantime, from now until 2 days from now, what you need to be doing is babying it. I know this sounds really stupid, but I love to make broth just like I love to can, and I am so proud at the end, and so I just really want to make sure that everything's going to go right. So every couple of hours I will stir it. I will make sure that not too much of the liquid has evaporated. You want liquid in there, and you want all of those nutrients and all that flavor and everything to be in that liquid. So in my situation, I like to continue adding water to keep that level up high because I want a lot of broth. I want a lot of broth to can. So that is your marching orders for the next 2 days. Come in here and stir it up and see how it's doing. Talk to it a little bit, baby it, love it, and in a couple of days it's going to be fantastic. Hey, in the morning, I guarantee when you wake up, your whole family is just gonna say, "Oh my goodness, what smells so good? The broth smells so good." Both of my daughters, when I'm making broth, they have to come in through the kitchen and lift the lid off and smell it, and they're always just so excited that I'm making broth. And in the end, before we can it, we all have a nice big warm mug of it. So anyway, I will see you back in a couple of days, and so you can see how amazing it will look. Well, I couldn't wait 2 days to show you how fantastic this broth is looking. Plus, I remembered that I forgot. I remembered that I forgot to tell you to add some vinegar. So I want to show you how amazing this looks. I'm going to stir it. And then I'm going to add in just a couple glugs of white vinegar. Let me show you how fantastic this is starting to look after 1 day. It's only been 1 day. Now let me stir it. Doesn't this look fantastic so far? This is going to be so yummy. So I'm just going to put this down here. I don't know how much of this vinegar I put in. Like I said, just a couple glugs. That is just fine. Now the reason you want to put vinegar in is it will help draw out all of the nutrients and minerals from those bones. You know, there's going to be good flavor coming from the meat that's in there, but the best part about bone broth is all of those minerals and nutrients that are extracted from all of those bones, and the vinegar will help do that. It's not going to add taste at all. You're not going to taste the vinegar, I promise. But this is a very important step that I forgot to tell you about before. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say is, remember yesterday, or a couple minutes ago, I had said, I promise that your kids and your husband and stuff like that, when they come in the house, they're going to say, oh my gosh, that smells so good. Well, that's already happened like 3 times. Samantha came to me and said, Mom, the broth smells so good. I can't wait for it to be done. And this morning when we woke up, oh, the house just smelled so amazing. Like I said yesterday, I'm going to let this go for a total of 2 days. So I will check back with you tomorrow so you can see what the finished product looks like, and then we'll do the steps after that. So see you in a bit. Well, it's been 3 days since I started the broth, and even though I wanted to do this part after 2 days, you know, things just happen and days go by. So I want to just kind of go through with you the end process of making homemade bone broth. And just show you a couple different options of how you can do this. So you can see that the broth is an absolutely beautiful color. It's a nice dark brown, and a lot of that color comes from keeping the skins on the onion. If you've made chicken broth before, you know, maybe you know that a lot of times it comes out pretty light brown, but putting in those onion skins really does bring out a really beautiful color. So it's finished, and now what we need to do is we need to separate the broth portion from all the meat and the bones and the veggies and things that you put in there. So when I start separating the bones and stuff out, I use a tongs to get like the big bones and the big pieces out, and then I switch to a slotted spoon to just scoop out a lot of that. And with the big bones, I'll normally put all the big stuff in a big strainer inside my pot like this. And so I can still get some of the liquid that drips down into there. I can still get that, and I'm not wasting it and just throwing it away. So, you know, it's really just as simple as grabbing some of those big pieces, careful it's hot, and putting that into, you know, your big colander. And I don't really worry about a lot of the little stuff yet, because I'm going to go through and put the little stuff through a smaller strainer. And so I'll just keep doing this until I get everything. When I start feeling like I'm not making enough progress fast enough, I switch to my slotted spoon, and that way I can I feel like I can get more done at one time. Well, I have all the big pieces and bones out for the most part, and so now I'm going to be switching to passing all the liquid through a smaller strainer, so it will catch any of the bigger bits, and most of even the little smaller bits, but I'm not super worried about the smaller bits because, you know, it'll just add to the broth. Now you can strain these right into jars if you're going to freeze these into jars, and that's what I'm going to do first. I don't plan to freeze this, I plan to can it, but I just want to give you an example and show you kind of what it's going to look like. So I use just a regular quart jar with a canning funnel on top, so I can control a little bit more where the liquid is going, and then I just put this strainer on top and start ladling it in. So you can see at the top of the jar here that the fat rises to the top. And regardless of whether or not you're going to can this or whether you're going to freeze this, you need to remove the fat. You can wait until this cools and you can put it in the refrigerator, and that fat will harden a little bit, which will help you get that fat off of there. Otherwise, you can take just a small ladle and just dip all of that off. Now, if you are planning to freeze these in the jars, it is imperative that you leave enough space without any liquid, because as it freezes, the liquid, it will expand and some of it will start rising up toward the top of the jar, and if you have a top screwed on there too tight, you're going to bust your glass jar. Not like I've ever done that. Shh, I have. So what I normally do is I drain this into a big stock pot. This may actually take more than one stock pot because I made such a big batch. I will let this cool out on the counter for a good part of the day before I put it in the refrigerator. This is too hot to go in your refrigerator right away. It's just going to make your fridge work too hard. It could actually ruin your refrigerator. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm just going to strain the rest of this through the small strainer and let it sit out on the counter to cool before I put it into the refrigerator. I will put it into the refrigerator for probably about 24 hours to allow that fat to harden, maybe a couple days if that's what it needs. After that, I'll skim off all of the fat and I'll go ahead and pressure can it. I'm not going to be showing you today how to pressure can this stock, although I do want to let you know that after the Christmas season and after New Year's, I am working on a Canning 101 how-to series where I'm going to teach how to both water bath can and to pressure can, so stay tuned for that. So you guys, before I finish all of this, I just want to let you know, thank you so much for stopping by the homestead to learn about canning large batches of bone broth, poultry broth in this situation. If you have any questions or comments about this, I would love to have you do that below in the comments section. If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, I would appreciate it if you would do that, and you can do that by hitting the subscribe button below. Until next time, you guys, thanks so much for stopping by the homestead. Take care and God bless.